Good day, everyone. Welcome to Automotive Reprocessing Welding Qualifications. This is course P2. I'm going to be your host for the next few minutes. My name is Bob Bosworth, I'm president of Elite Welding Solutions. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go over a very brief program that identifies exactly how we implement and how we maintain and how we develop welding quality programs inside of a plant. So the first thing we always have to remember is there are 3 segments to this training program, and this is one I've drawn up specifically for steel. Now, just before I get too far into this presentation, this presentation comes from years of working with the OEMs, looking over specs. Ford actually has very specifics, many specifics in their specs. And one says actually they have to have 40 hours of training. Now this is something that needs to be a discussion, because 40 hours of training doesn't mean they have to practice or do the theory and all this other stuff. It just means they have to have this much instruction, which means they're working while they're learning in the later phases of their process. So there's always going to be an eligibility phase and a training phase and a qualification phase. Whether you divide it up this way or not, this is the best way to look at it. So let's start with eligibility. So there's always external candidates who walk in, who have to go through a certain amount of criteria, and this is what falls under human resources. And then there's always internal candidates that should have some type of an orientation to understand what they're getting into when they say, hey, I want to be a welder. And then, of course, there's always certain things people have to go through. I've had many great people that have said to me, I really want to learn how to weld, who struggled so much we really couldn't get them to the line. I so appreciated how hard they were working at it, but they just didn't have the aptitude to handle the equipment. Or in most cases, when you actually pull the trigger, some people are quite frightened, become frightened and don't get over it. Now, one of the big important ones in here, and I'm hoping that somebody from Human Resources is around, is the vision test. I've had enormous issues with people that literally cannot see what they need to inspect. So you would have to do this from an HR perspective, is to have some type of a guideline for welding people to ensure they can see. It became such an issue at one plant that Ford themselves demanded that the people be able to see, and they actually put a number on it, 20/40 or better, uncorrected. So if that just happens to be, I think they pulled that out of like the driver's license, because that's pretty much what it has to be for the province of Ontario. And a lot of companies, to make sure they're ready and prepared for this, put a few written tests up. They give them an opportunity to do some practice, and of course, if it's somebody robotic, we're going to do some skill testing on them. So now we've decided, we know these people have the capability and the capacity for the information. So now we decide that this person could be a good team production member, or if they pass, they go on for theoretical training. So that was actually one of the programs that's going to be coming up. You're going to see that probably it should be very close to the next program you take from this if you're doing the automotive training regime. Then there's going to be, after this theoretical, then there's going to be a written test. In this written test, there's going to be quality, there's going to be process, there's going to be safety. There's all kinds of things in it that happen throughout. And then, of course, if you don't have practical abilities, you have to go into some form of practical training. Now, I don't believe 4 hours of training can get anybody exactly where they need to be. But 4 hours of good, close instruction with somebody that knows what they're doing can go for miles. You always have to remember when you're training people, and I even do this for a plant or you do it for yourself, you always have to remember training people that your time, their time watching you is as important as their time doing it. Right? Remember, most people can watch something and figure out how it's done. And this is where all the hours come in. This is why Ford put all the hours in there, because they want you in a cell working with somebody for 2 or 3 shifts to find out if you can do it. take your turn. Take a break. You watch the person weld, then you do it, then you watch, then you do it, and then you do it, and you do it, and you watch, you do it until you have this type of skill set. Until it becomes natural. There will be a point where it barely feels like work because it just becomes a natural movement. And every 2 years, we should be refreshing a theoretical test and a practical test. Now, due diligence would say throw the people a written test every year. You sit them down, you give them a written test, throw a bunch of fresh safety stuff in it, and it all becomes part of your process for your audits. I have left a provision here that people can repeat the theory if they had problems with it. Inside of all this stuff, inside of all the training phase with all these theories, we have to take into consideration English as a second language. Not everybody's strong with English for written testing, in which case we can do special things, and we have done special things for people and done a bit of an oral test, and then I sign off on them as a third party. The qualification phase is simply welding. Now, some people can get down to here if they pass the test and they get there. We can exempt them from this because we're going to take them right into an AWS test. So what we do is that AWS is the American Welding Society, and they have different specifications for different materials. AWS have a spec called AWSD 1.3 that allows down to 1/8 of an inch, or I believe less. But what we do is we actually take one of the tests out of that, and we have you perform that test, and it's a destructive test that we know the answers to right away. You get a hold of me, contact me if you wanted more information about that, how you wanted to do it. You have to have, in order to properly say that these people have the skill set, they have to have a test that tests those skills, right? We can't just give them a piece of paper, sign that off, and say, yes, that's it. So in the qualification phase, this is where they qualify. And if you wanted to look at this very technically, this side certifies and this side qualifies, right? People talk about welder's tickets. Welder's tickets are all qualifications. I've had hundreds. And it's not a big deal to have hundreds. Every thickness of material, many ranges of thickness of material, that is different types of materials. All these things require different tickets. Even when we change a position, you have to have tickets, right? So then if there's any special training, we put it in here. And that is special training. For example, Maserati had a few special little things that were a little bit beyond what the regular standards would do. And then I do a QA test. Once again, contact me about that. Then these people get their internal reprocess certification, and then we put that into all the documents. And usually, depending on what your audits cover, it covers a lot, right, to do with the welding side of things. So that's it for that. Any questions, please contact me, and we can get to the bottom of it. I can always assist with documentation, tests, anything else to do with the programs you're about to see, and I hope you enjoy them. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.